Over these last years, I've read more than 300 fantasy books, and today what we're gonna see are books ranging from what I believe are perfect for beginners to more advanced fantasy. So whatever you fit in that range, you can find your next 5 stars fantasy book. And let's start with the blockbusters, those authors, those series that are incredibly well known, and that regardless of you being a completely newbie, these books are usually well taken. And starting with Brandon Sanderson, I believe the first book to start, it's Mistborn, so the Final Empire. It had a lot of different tropes within it. It's very plot driven, but it has a lot of character growth, a lot of different points of view, so you will be able to see not just one character but very prominent other characters within this story. We will have a hard magic system, which means that the magic had a set of rules that you can understand, that are explained, which I believe are really helpful to get into fantasy. And in this case, we'll have this incredible magic system where people are able to ingest metals, and depending on what metal you are ingesting, you are able to do something. So you can almost fly, you can persuade people, and we will see this story where we'll follow the aftermath of what would happen if the bad one were to rule. And we pick up this story with a society that it's really enslaved, and we will have this revolution kind of vibe. We will have also a little bit of romance and a lot of emotions. I also believe Mistborn, it's a very good point to start, because although it's a trilogy, the first book can read almost as a standalone. So if you finish this book, you are like, okay, I want to continue, and you can continue and the story will unravel. But if you don't like it, you at least will feel that part of the story has been satisfied.
It's a win.
Another book that really had a lot of fans, even newbies, it's Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. This is a story that it's very character driven. We will follow our main narrator, who is Kvothe, and we will follow his story. We will have this narration style where we know that something is happening at the beginning, this gathering, and this main character telling his story. And therefore we will go to the past and we will start seeing the different events. And the magic of this book, it's that the character, it's really charismatic. It's kind of like his own hero, and it has this touch of not really knowing if what happens is true or if he's flattering himself a little bit.
I don't trust you.
It had a lot of different settings, so that will also really help. It's more medieval touch, so it's also more reminiscent of what we might believe of fantasy. What I must say though is that this is an unconcluded series, in that each book just grows and grows and grows. So if the commitment it's there, you like it, then you can definitely spend your time with it. Neil Gaiman is such an iconic author, and it has a lot of different books from which you can pick and get very well into fantasy, but I decided that Stardust is just fantastic. First, it's a standalone that it's super ultra mega short, and secondly, it had again a lot of different tropes that are kind of like characteristic of fantasy. First, we will see this portal fantasy world, so we will have these characters that live in this land, and there's this world that separates worlds, and when our main character will cross it, he will find this world full of magic. He will find witches, a trial, and at the core of this story we will have a misfit.
Wow, it's amazing.
There's a right touch of humor to it, and it's a very bright book. It's really packed, and I don't believe you will be disappointed.
Trust me.
Continuing with the bright standalones, we have House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This book has made fans all over the world because it is not really long, and it had just this perfect blend of dark humor, but then it's really cute. It's kind of like a happy book, and we will follow, in this case, a different kind of person. There's a middle-aged man, and he is in charge of taking care of the children in the different orphanages, because they're children that are magical. And one day he will receive this task of taking care and seeing if everything is good with these 6 children that are supposed to be the most dangerous children out there. And when he goes to this house, we will see, you know, like this turning story where we will find our character with a lot of prejudices, then things will change. We will see these children being like the devil. There's a little werewolf, and there's a lot of moments where you will find pure joy here. It's really light on magic. It's more really upon the different creatures, paranormal creatures that we will see in fantasy, like werewolves. There's also like a fairy. There's not a lot of world building. It's fairly easy to read and I really loved it. But if you are coming to fantasy more from the romance side, or if you want stories that have a great romance within it, I really recommend A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J Maas. Sarah J Maas will steal your heart if you like romance, if you like Chosen One and very well crafted stories. And overall this series, it's very easy to get into it. It's pretty consuming, and it had again these elements of a portal fantasy. So we will have our girl that will go to the Fae world, then we will be introduced to this concept that it's pretty famous within fantasy, especially within the young adult spectrum, which is the Fae. And we will see these different courts. The courts have different powers, also trials at its core, also forbidden love. It starts being a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but things will real change from book 2 onwards. And let's jump now to another step, what I believe are more intermediate fantasy reads, but also let's keep this nice blend. And we will also start with Brandon Sanderson with Warbreaker. Fairly good for beginners, but I believe the magic system, it's not as straightforward, or at least it's not as common. You might not have read or seen anything like it. This is based on breaths.
How interesting.
And these breaths are able to power people up. They are able to see colors, to modify reality a little bit. And we will have different points of view in this story, which is why I really believe this has another layer of complexity, because we will see these mainly two sisters going through this incredible fate that they had ahead. And they're really dangerous. But the story of the two will go completely different settings, different characters. And also there's a third point of view here, which is pretty religious, but it's at the same time very humorous. It's very bright, I believe. It's the right amount of romance, of friendship, of courage. It had this sentient object, which is also something that it's pretty common within the fantasy genre, and keeping the multiple points of view and also the very political touch to the book. We have the Aurelian cycle. This is a trilogy that has just been concluded this year, and honestly one of my favorites. I think this is hugely underrated. This is not closely as popular as the rest of the book here, but I believe it's fantastic. If you're in for a game of minds, we will see these different characters that have very different backgrounds, very different past, and they are about to face these trials to become the captain of the fleet of the dragons. We will have this story where these two main characters are friends since they are children, because they are orphans. It seems that the family of our guy Lee was killed because he belonged to this long lineage of dragon lords, and dragon lords were evil. People rebelled and killed them all. And our girl Annie, it's also an orphan because Lee's family killed all of her family. So
My favorite book.
And let's move again to Hard Magic Systems with Promise of Blood by Brian McClellan. And this is a book that really draws from a lot of different elements as well. We will have these different points of view, different stories that are not really blending. So you will have that divided mind, and we will have one that it's more political, another one that's more war oriented, and then another one that it's more kind of like a detective-esque kind of vibe. So it really blends pretty nicely different elements. We will have this hard magic system explained, where there are 3 different levels of magic. We will start real strong with a coup happening, and we will see the aftermath of that. But there's also prophecy and keeping the multiple points of view, but in this case doing it in a way that will allow you to see if you love the humor, the dark humor, the satiric touch to it. We have Spiderlight by Adrian Tchaikovsky.
Let him have his fun.
If when you think of fantasy, you think about a Dungeons and Dragons kind of vibe, Spiderlight or also Kings of the Wild are books that will really made it for you. Spiderlight in particular will be a kind of Lord of the Rings, but really shortened. It's a standalone. There's a quest here where we will see that they will need to defeat the great evils, but we will also see these different types of characters, these different archetypes.
Very interesting.
I'm just putting it here and not in the beginners, because I honestly think there's a lot going on. There's so much action, but there's also pretty hardcore fantasy. So kind of like you need to be advised with that. And you might be surprised by the next book that I'm settling in this category, and please let me know down below in the comments if you believe this is more something for beginners. But I believe Six of Crows by Lee Bardugo. It's not as easy, but definitely worth the ride. We'll have 6 different characters, which again, it's why I'm settling here in this second bucket. The world building is not really complex because we live throughout this Grishaverse, which if you know or if you have seen the TV series, you're already like halfway through to understanding it. But if you don't, it's not going to be really explained here. It won't matter because there's not really a lot of magic. The characters here are really well fleshed out and are again really complex. And although at its core is this heist, this is a story of a band of misfits that want to change things for themselves, and they want to steal something to become rich and become the most powerful gang. What we will see underneath is a story that touches a lot of trauma, a lot of pain, which introduces for me very nicely the next step with grey characters and the queen of grey characters. It's V. Ishwab, and I cannot really recommend enough Vicious. This is a dual point of view perspective, but it's here because it has this technique where you will know that something will happen in the future. So there's this event coming, this almost war that is about to happen, but we will also see flashbacks until we go to the present, and you know, the present, it's always obsessed with that event. So there's also going to be a fairly amount of time where you don't understand what is happening, who is good and who is worse, because in here there's definitely no good character. The premise of this story, it's phenomenal in my opinion, which is that these 2 best friends discovered in university that playing with near-death experiences can grant you powers. And the first chapters are gonna be brutal, and what you will see will just follow that line. And speaking of which, moving to the grim dark spectrum, we will have Joe Abercrombie as its king. Also Steve Erickson with Melassan. I haven't read Melassan, that's why I'm not going to be recommending it. The First Law, I wasn't really a huge fan, but I know that a lot of people love it. It's really character driven, and you know, the characters are savage. In this case, there's also this medieval kind of setting where we will have these different characters that are just going through their lives.
And that's all I have to say about that.
But moving to that blend of almost horror, sci-fi and fantasy, I cannot really recommend enough The Drowning Empire. And a concluded series at the moment, but book 1 and 2 are out and I believe are just outstandingly good. It's not really a book that it's hard to get into it, but the world building, it's a little bit complex. The magic, it's also way different to what we are used to. And in the first book, there are as well a lot of different points of view that don't live in the same land, so you will have to have this mind divided through these different sections, and what they pass, it's pretty heavy. It brings one of the most maybe common topics within the sci-fi world, where we will see that our character does not have any memories and she will need to work real hard to recover that because the stakes are really high.
Who are you? Are you frightened?
In this world, the magic, it's hard again, and it's very fascinating to me. This family, it's able to craft creatures. They need bones that they harvest from the people, and they are able to inscribe those bones, and as a result, create these creatures that then arise and are constructed to be ruled. And I believe the writing, it's fantastic and I adored it. In concluding this list, for me, the best one out there, it's the Stormlight Archive, also by Brandon Sanderson. It's not that it's super complex to get into it because overall Sanderson had a very accessible writing style, but in here, the magic system, it's really more layered. We will have different types of things that you can access, but in order for that to happen, you need to fulfill a certain criteria. So it's not really straightforward, and you will be discovering what happens throughout the book. There are also different characters, again, in different points of the land. They eventually converge, but what they pass, it's really dense, it's really deep, and it's, for me, a mind-blowing experience. It's a fight between different species at its core, but there there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of political maneuvers. It's here because it's super long. It's gonna be 10 books long. There are 4 out. If all of these seems like a lot of commitment, I will link here a video where I will be showing 16 standalone, so not commitment, divided by moods, so you can select what you like based on how you feel.